Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the absolutely incredible sequence of historical accidents and sheer problem solving that gave us the modern firearm. It's mind-blowing to realize that nobody actually sat down and planned to invent the gun. It's true. It turns out every single rifle, pistol, and machine gun on Earth traces back through a massive thousand-year chain of human error, wild coincidences, and entirely unintended consequences. Let's get right into it. Listen to this wild warning. Do not mix these substances. It leads nowhere. It is a dead end. That was actually written by Tang Dynasty Taoist alchemists way back around 850 AD. And what were they trying to do? They were literally trying to cure aging. Commissioned by emperors to find this mythical elixir of immortality, they were mixing sulfur, saltpeter, and charcoal on a stove. Well, instead of endless life, they accidentally created huoyao, gunpowder. The building caught fire, hands and faces were badly burned, and they explicitly wrote this down in a text called The Classified Essentials of the Mysterious Tao as a completely failed experiment. A literal dead end.
Just think about the staggering irony there for a second. 1 billion. That is the estimated number of guns in the world today. That supposed dead-end elixir, originally meant to halt death, ultimately led to a device causing more deaths than any other weapon in human history. The very medicine that was supposed to protect life ended up setting the stage for taking it on a scale nobody could have imagined. And, of course, it completely changed the trajectory of our modern world.
Now look how fast the military completely ignored that alchemical running. It was almost immediate. By 904 AD, Chinese soldiers were already packing this powder into incendiary arrows, creating what they called flying fires. From there, we see a really rapid, terrifying escalation. We go from grenades hurled by catapults in the 10th century to fire lances, which were basically bamboo tubes of gunpowder strapped to spears by 1150 AD. Then, historians note a massive, pivotal moment in 1259, the first bullet concept in recorded history. It was a pellet wad that completely sealed the barrel, forcing all that explosive gas forward. And by 1288, boom, we have the Heilongjiang bronze hand cannon, the oldest surviving firearm. That is a massive technological leap in just a few centuries.
But, okay, these early hand cannons had a huge, incredibly clumsy design flaw. They essentially required 2 people to fire. One person had to physically hold and aim this really heavy metal tube, and a second person had to manually apply a burning stick to a tiny touch hole to set off the powder. It was super awkward, and that burning stick had to be kept constantly lit between every single shot. The fire, essentially, was entirely on the outside of the weapon.
So the real game changer came around 1475 with something called the matchlock mechanism. It finally brought the fire inside the gun, and it featured the very first trigger in the history of firearms. Squeezing it lowered a spring-loaded arm, called a serpentine, that held a chemically treated, smoldering piece of rope right down into a little pan of powder. For the very first time, one single person could aim and fire a gun without needing an assistant. It's wild to think about, but this brilliantly simple mechanism completely revolutionized warfare. I mean, it eventually ended 5 centuries of armored knight dominance, simply because a single matchlock ball could punch straight through plate armor long before the cavalry could even close the distance. But the matchlock created a brand new, massive tactical nightmare. Think about it for a second. How exactly do you hide an army that glows in the dark? That smoldering rope had to stay lit all the time. If it rained, your fire went out. In the wind, it burned totally unpredictably. And at night, every single soldier glowed like a candle from 30 feet away. Anyone watching could see exactly where an entire army was moving through the pitch blackness.
So obviously, the glowing rope had to go. They needed fire created on demand. Enter the flintlock, generally attributed to the French gunsmith Morin Le Bourgeois around 1620. Instead of a burning cord, a hammer held a piece of flint. When you pulled the trigger, the flint struck a steel blade, dropping sparks directly into the priming powder. Bam! No more glowing in the dark, no more rain putting out your smoldering match. It was so remarkably effective that it completely dominated military firearms for over 200 years. It's actually the longest reigning firing mechanism in history.
But then, we get a really bizarre twist. You see, the flintlock had a fatal flaw baked right into its physics. When that flint struck the steel, it produced a very visible flash, a tiny microsecond before the main charge actually fired. Now, trained soldiers eventually learned not to flinch, but more importantly, ducks sitting on Scottish marshes learned to see the flash and actually dive underwater before the bullet could reach them. No way, right? Which begs a truly ridiculous historical question. How do you hide a spark from ducks?
Well, enter the Reverend Alexander Forsyth. He was an obsessive duck hunter who grew incredibly tired of losing arguments to birds. He spent a solid decade trying to outsmart them, and his solution was actually brilliant: mercury fulminate. This is an impact-sensitive explosive. It doesn't need an exposed spark or an open flame at all. It explodes purely from the physical impact of a hammer blow. For the Reverend, this meant absolutely no visible warning flash for the ducks and instant ignition.
Let's look at the incredible fallout of Forsyth's duck hunting frustration. He patents his mechanism in 1807. Napoleon immediately sees the immense tactical value and offers him 20,000 pounds for it on the spot. Forsyth flatly refuses. Now, ironically, the British military completely dismissed the invention as rubbish and actually kicked him out of the Tower of London. But the idea survived. By 1822, an American inventor named Joshua Shaw put that impact-sensitive fulminate into a tiny copper percussion cap. And ultimately, that little copper cap directly paved the way for the integrated weatherproof brass cartridges we use in virtually every firearm today. All because a minister really wanted to shoot ducks.
Okay, so ignition was perfectly solved, but now they hit a brand new bottleneck: loading speed. Soldiers on the battlefield faced a brutal choice. Rifling, those spiral grooves inside a barrel that spin a bullet for crazy accuracy, was already known. But manually forcing a tightly fitted lead ball all the way down a grooved barrel took massive physical effort. A soldier could fire a highly accurate rifled musket maybe once a minute, but they could fire a wildly inaccurate smoothbore musket 3 or 4 times a minute. Armies naturally prioritized the faster rate of fire, so mass battlefields stayed terrifyingly inaccurate for a very long time. Then, in 1849, a French captain named Claude-Étienne Minier completely solved this with a brilliantly simple design. The Minier ball was a soft, cylindrical bullet made just slightly smaller than the inside of the barrel. This meant it dropped straight down effortlessly, giving you the super-fast loading speed of a smoothbore musket. But here's the trick: it had a hollow base. When the gunpowder exploded, the expanding gas pushed that base outward, instantly jamming the soft lead directly into the rifling grooves. You suddenly had precision rifle accuracy at musket loading speeds. It was a total game changer. And sadly, this single invention led to absolute tragedy. 620,000. That is the devastating death toll of the American Civil War. Why? Because regular soldiers were now holding weapons that could kill accurately at 300 yards, but their generals were still actively using old battlefield tactics designed for weapons that only fired 100 yards. Armies essentially marched shoulder to shoulder directly into incredibly accurate, high-speed rifle fire. The mini ball ended up killing more Americans than any other projectile in history. It fundamentally and violently changed how we fight. So, range and accuracy were solved, but another massive problem remained. The smoke simply had to go. You see, every single shot fired from these rifles produced a huge, dense cloud of black powder smoke. After just a few volleys back and forth, entire battlefields essentially vanished. Shooters were completely blinded, unable to see their targets, and generals literally couldn't even see their own troops moving. We desperately needed another historical accident, and wow, did we get one in 1846. Chemistry professor Christian Friedrich Schoenbein was experimenting in his kitchen, which, by the way, his wife had specifically banned him from doing. He knocks over a flask of concentrated nitric and sulfuric acid right across the floor. Panicking, he grabs the nearest thing to mop it up, his wife's cotton apron. He wrings it out, hangs it on the hot oven door to dry quickly before she gets home, and poof, it vanished. It combusted in under a second with absolutely no smoke and no ash whatsoever. The acid had nitrated the cellulose in the cotton apron. Without meaning to, he had accidentally invented nitrocellulose, the world's first entirely new explosive since gunpowder. Now, Schoenbein's gun cotton was incredibly unstable at first. Early factories actually exploded trying to manufacture it. But by 1884, French chemist Paul Vier managed to stabilize it into a controllable powder, giving us the world's first smokeless propellant. Britain quickly adopted their own version, called cordite. This meant the blinding smoke on the battlefield was finally gone forever. And incredibly, every single modern firearm cartridge in production today still uses a nitrocellulose-based smokeless powder that originates directly from that clumsy kitchen spill. At this point, almost every single problem tracing back to 850 AD was fixed. But one massive thing hadn't changed since the very first hand cannon. Pulling the trigger only fired one single bullet. A soldier who ran out of rounds while reloading was completely vulnerable. The gun needed to reload itself. This is where American electrical inventor Hiram Maxim enters the story, driven by an unbelievably cynical piece of advice he received at a trade show. Hang your chemistry and electricity. If you want to make a pile of money, invent something that will enable these Europeans to cut each other's throats with greater facility.
Maxim had absolutely zero weapons background, but he definitely wanted to make a pile of money.
Maxim remembered how much a rifle kicked against his shoulder when it was fired. Every other designer in the world saw that recoil as a problem to be mitigated. Maxim, he treated it as a power source. He figured out how to harness the intense physical energy of that recoil to push the bolt back, automatically eject the spent cartridge, and load the next one right into the chamber. As long as you held the trigger back, the mechanical loop simply didn't stop. By 1884, Maxim built the very first truly automatic machine gun. 600 rounds per minute. It's staggering. Warfare was permanently and brutally shifted. We saw the absolute devastation of this in 1916 at the Battle of the Somme, where German Maxim guns killed 20,000 British soldiers on the very first day alone. The weapon born from a sarcastic comment at a trade show completely changed the face of the modern world.
But there was still one final bottleneck. The Maxim gun weighed 60 pounds. It needed a massive water jacket just to keep the barrel from literally melting, and it took a dedicated team of 4 to operate it. It was strictly a fixed-position defensive weapon. No single infantry soldier could possibly pick up that immense, continuous firepower and carry it forward into an assault. That final problem waited until 1941. Mikhail Kalashnikov, a 22-year-old Soviet tank commander, was wounded and recovering in a military hospital. He lay there listening to wounded infantrymen complain about having to face heavy German automatic weapons with their outdated single-fire rifles. Now, Kalashnikov wasn't a formally trained engineer. He was a tinkerer. He started sketching, stripping the automatic machine gun down to its absolute bare, indestructible essentials. He used a super simple gas-operated action and a rotating bolt with just 2 lugs. What he created was an automatic weapon so incredibly simple, it was completely immune to mud, sand, and freezing cold.
The AK-47 was officially adopted by the Soviet Army in 1949, finally giving the individual infantry soldier reliable, fully automatic firepower. And today, an estimated 100 million of them have been produced. It's almost unbelievable to comprehend that scale. It is way more than any other firearm in human history, fundamentally altering global conflicts ever since.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer and leaves us with a truly profound final thought. In 2013, shortly before his death at age 94, Mikhail Kalashnikov wrote a letter to the Russian Orthodox Church asking a haunting question. Does the inventor bear the moral responsibility for the deaths caused by an invention that was never supposed to exist? The church told him no, but it really leaves us to wonder. From Taoist alchemists trying to cure death, to a minister just trying to hunt ducks, to a chemist hiding a spilled flask from his wife, the gun was an invention that was never supposed to exist. So what really is the moral weight of a 1,000-year chain of total accidents? Think about that, and keep questioning the history of the everyday things around you.